Iván Duque is a protege of former President Álvaro Uribe, who actually led the no vote, the no campaign against the peace treaty. So what would Iván Duque's presidency mean for the peace?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Iván Duque would seek to change or reverse many elements in the peace process. He's been especially a critic of the provisions on transitional justice, which he sees as giving too much leniency to members of the FARC, including those who will take up seats in the Congress. He has been a critic of the way that coca eradication has been carried out or not carried out by the Santos administration, and is looking towards going back to aerial fumigation and forced eradication. So I think there are lots of elements of the peace deal that will be actively changed or sought to be changed, and others that will simply be abandoned because of lack of resources, lack of financial resources, as well as political capital. So I think it's fair to say that that the peace process would not prosper under a Duque presidency.
But the peace accord does retain broad international support. So how will it impact Colombia's relationship with the rest of the world?
Well, again, I think you've pointed out a key anomaly here. The peace accord was submitted to a plebiscite shortly after its signing, and it lost by a very narrow margin, less than half a percentage point, showing, you know, the deep polarization in the country over not so much the fact that there was a negotiated peace, but the specific aspects dealing with transitional justice and also political participation. So there is, I think, a division in the country, and at the same time, there has been an embrace by the international community, certainly reflected in the Nobel Peace Prize that was given to President Santos a few years ago. And I think this will be a real challenge should Iván Duque be elected. I mean, all the polls seem to indicate that that's the case. It's not a given by any means. Polls have been notoriously wrong in Colombia. But should he be elected, I think that he's going to face pressure, certainly here in the United States, to maintain aspects of the peace accord and certainly to address the issue of the murder of social activists, of human rights defenders in rural areas.
Right.
A very difficult issue.
Cindy, is it too simplistic to suggest that actually we're seeing increased polarization within Colombia? We have more activity from the left since the peace activity. You suggest that, for example, Duque is likely to move somewhat further right. Are we really ending up with a tale of two countries here? And what is the chance of the left coming in with perhaps a Petro or somebody?
I think the chances of Gustavo Petro winning the election are very slim. I think that a lot of people are opposed to Uribe and will vote for Petro, holding their noses simply because they don't want Iván Duque in power. And I think what's interesting to me is that the polarization around the peace agreement was certainly reflected in the plebiscite. But what you see here is a polarization of the electorate over two very radically different visions of the country. Duque's law and order, kind of security-based approach to things versus Petro, who wants social justice and investment in the countryside. And the fact that those are the two visions and that people from the traditional parties are at the lowest levels that they've ever been historically, I think is really notable.
Just quickly, hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans pouring into Colombia. Will Duque's approach towards them change?
I think that a Duque presidency would feel that there is a very strong need to limit the amount of Venezuelan migration. There will be an appeal for more international assistance, but I think that there will be much greater efforts to control the border and to limit the flow. I think that the relationship between Colombia and Venezuela could get much more difficult.